Has this year created a massive challenge for your business? Are you struggling to find leads, build your pipeline, or just make better connections with potential buyers and sellers? If so, this episode is for you. Today, I talked to Brid Mortamais out of Greenwich, Connecticut, who authentically was able to tap into her natural skill set, which, mind you, we all have. Now, before we get started, if you find value in content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. And as always, I'm your host and referral partner out of San Francisco, Shawn Kunkler.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here and interested to have a conversation with you.
I'm actually genuinely, I'm looking forward to it. We spoke briefly on the phone, and just in our conversation, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to have you on the show. You have just such a fascinating story, and your trajectory in the business has been short and incredibly fast in terms of growth. And so I think there's a lot that people will be able to definitely glean from this, which I think is obviously always the point. So clearly, people listening, you have an accent. You're not originally from the US. Give us a little bit of context of where you were born, where you grew up, and kind of your early days.
Okay, so I was born in County Leitrim in Ireland. And so I grew up there, and most of my family still lives there. And I go back regularly. I like to say I go back for a software update, get my accent back up to date. And so I went to university in Dublin, and my background is finance. I studied accounting and finance in Dublin, and I qualified as a chartered accountant. And then I decided I really wanted to study French. I loved France and the French culture. I had an amazing French teacher in high school who inspired me. And I always say that she's responsible for the trajectory at least in part, for some of the trajectory my life has taken. So I went to Paris for a semester and studied at the Sorbonne, and I took a business French course there. And so after that, then I was like, okay, I had lived the student life in Paris for 6 months, and I had some student debt, nothing like student debt here in the US, but I had some debts, and I needed to go to work and start paying that off. And so I ended up going to London because in terms of recruitment, there's a very long recruitment process in France, and also a very long firing process. So it takes 3 months to get hired and 3 months to get fired. So I didn't have 3 months to wait. So I went to London, and I got, I had family there, stayed with them for a short time, and got hired by Goldman Sachs. And I worked for them on their French government bond desk, reporting on the finance side in London. And I did that for a year, and then they moved me back to Paris. So it was during that time in Paris with Goldman Sachs that I met my husband, who's French, but had just come back from a work abroad program in the US. So he had been living and working in Dayton, Ohio for 18 months.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, and that also ties into his fascination with the US and us coming here. So we lived and worked in Paris I was there for 18 years in total. We got married, started our family. So our 2 children were born there. And my husband had his own business. He was an entrepreneur and set up a small telecom company, a competitor to France Telecom at the time, and just when that market deregulated. And that was something he had seen in the US. So he brought that idea back to France and implemented that and built up the business. And got to the point where the business was doing well, but he wanted to go back and experience the US entrepreneurship experience again. So that was part of why we moved in 2012. We also wanted our children to have sort of a multicultural experience, and we wanted them to go to school here, actually. We liked the US school system. So we moved here in 2012, and we were not expats or anything like that. We didn't have anyone organizing everything. That was myself and my husband, mainly me, moving us over here, just the whole finding the schools, finding the home, etc. And then we also bought a small business to make things even more complicated, to get our visa. Yes, so we bought a business, and I ran that for 5 years, and that was a children's gym. And that was, it was not easy because, again, running a business was something I hadn't done before, but also in a new country, it's a very different experience. Running a business in France, or, just business in France, running a business is much more of the customer is always right here as opposed to in Europe. So, it was definitely a learning curve. But that was also where I first, started to understand the importance of marketing and online marketing and social media for the business. So that's something that I brought into my real estate career. So we had that business until 2016 when we sold it. We got our green card. And then after that, I got my real estate license.
That is amazing. And it sounds like the through line with you and your husband is definitely the entrepreneurial DNA.
Yeah. A little bit of crazy maybe as well.
Which I think that's what, like, entrepreneur by definition has a little bit of crazy mixed into that definition. Absolutely. But it sounds like you both have just that spirit of adventure and that want that thing that sparks you for the excitement of the unknown, which is ultimately entrepreneurship. It's interesting too typically with finance, you have people generally who do it are more of the analytical. We all have those clients who just want everything in spreadsheets and they want to see the data and they don't make any decisions unless the numbers make sense. But it sounds like you have an interesting mix between the left brain and the right brain, where you have the marketing is very creative. It's very outside of the box. And so it sounds like you have this cool mix of both sides of the brain.
Yeah, that's interesting because when I was, when I sold the children's gym and I was sort of deciding what my next move, and I was definitely very interested in real estate and always had been. I've been watching the market here in Connecticut when we made our decision to move. That was sort of something we started looking at from 2010, and I was already watching the real estate market at that point. So I enjoyed following the market and seeing where things were trending and all of that. But I always saw myself as that finance person, analytical, all about the numbers. But before I actually got my license, I did this boot camp course, which was aimed at women going back to work after a career break to raise their families, which wasn't really my situation. But, I thought, okay, I knew the lady who was running it. And I said, I'll take this. I may learn something. And I did. One of the things that was, for me, was key coming out of all of that was, to your point, the left side and the right side of my brain. I was not this 100% analytical person that I always thought that was always how I thought of myself. That when I went through those, did one of those personality tests, I think I was something like 40% creative and, 40% analytical. I don't know if they're the exact numbers, but that's where it came out. And to me, that was very surprising. That was not how I saw myself or had seen myself. I always saw myself as the numbers person or, people person, to the extent that I had teams and I had to manage projects and, there were a lot of moving parts to getting a finance project together. But, it was more than just that analytical piece.
It's so interesting. And, just having done so many deals and as you have too, so many of them, you have to understand how to read the data, read the charts, understand the market, but you also have to be very creative to figure out sometimes, how do I get this? The seller wants this or the buyer wants this. And now I have to come up with a creative solution to get all these dots to connect between A and Z. And so it sounds like just internally, like you have this cool marriage or you're able to now tap into. Let me rephrase. It's almost like you were able to just merge all of those skills into your daily activities.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like that, actually. But yeah, that's probably true. I suppose it's a sort of just an ability to problem solve. It's like you're trying to get from A to Z. And yes, there may be some sort of obstacles on the way. It's like, you're trying to figure out what's the most important thing to people. I always find that interesting. It's I think I said earlier, it's an emotional process, buying a home.
For sure.
It's understanding people's motivation, what makes them tick. And I recently had clients who work in finance and moving out from New York City, and they're buying their first home as a couple. But it was just really interesting throughout the whole process. He always talked about the value proposition of the home. So for him, it was a financial decision. Yet, his wife was very much, it was all about, the emotion and raising a family and whatever. So there was an interesting balance between the two of them. And, having that financial background, I think helped me also I was able to talk to him on his, to his financial side and then deal with her on the emotional side. But it's this balancing act. And, that was just dealing with the two of them. And then you have the buyer's side, the seller's side to deal with as well. So it's an interesting process.
It's fascinating. I always view it as, in your example, the husband speaks the language of finance and the wife speaks the language of emotion. And you have to speak their language in order for them to hear you. Otherwise, you're speaking French to a room full of people who speak only English and they have no idea what you're saying. And so you have to really step back and observe and intimately understand what is important to this individual, not the couple, but the individual. And then how do I communicate that to them? And sometimes you just have to keep asking, because even when somebody says, I want to raise my family here, if you ask that question, what is it about raising your family here that's important to you? And you ask that 7 different ways, you'll eventually get to the emotional tie. And we all know residential real estate is very emotional, and emotion creates motion. And if you can't figure out that emotional driver, it's really hard to get somebody to see it from a different perspective and take action.
Totally agree. And you say in that situation, it was the husband, but it could equally be the wife as well. I've had situations where it's the wife is a financial person and you have to speak to her in that same way. And sometimes it just doesn't work because, the numbers don't add up and they're not, it can be just a bit more complicated than that. The numbers don't add up and emotionally they're not ready. I've been in situations where somebody tells me they want to sell, but they want to get this number. And then you get them that number. And then they're like, oh, well, actually, we're not quite ready yet, so it's a complex mix, and there's a lot of there are a lot of different skills at play in real estate, which I don't think people realize, when they're watching some of the reality TV shows.
Yeah, I could talk for hours about the how far-fetched some of those and just how grossly unrealistic they are. And 90% of the time we're dealing with an individual's largest investment they have. And backed into that is a ton of emotion. They're fearful. They don't want to risk or lose any ground that they made from this investment, or if they're investing. And so emotions, they can run really high. And so having a high EQ and really just stepping back and understanding what the client wants and needs, it's just so incredibly important. And we even talked briefly before it that your model is not a transactional approach. Yours is a relationship approach. And you shared with me that most of your clients have done 2 or 3 deals with you in a relatively short period of time. And people don't return to the crime scene if it was a bad experience. Like they only come back to you if they really feel like, oh my God, Breach really got my back. She really genuinely cares about us and she's genuinely taking care of us. How do you tap into that, or how do you approach that with clients to really just keep that front of mind?
When we come to things like the holidays and putting together events, and I see other agents, not actually with Compass, but other agents around town here who do these large events and they have hundreds of clients coming, and it seems really impressive. That's not the way I do it. I'm on a much more personal level. I literally put together a list of the people I've worked with in the past year, and also people I worked with in the past 2-3 years, and I'm still in contact with them. I've gotten to the point where I play pickleball with some of my clients, or I go to dinner, or so it's about an ongoing friendship relationship. It's not. I don't like to think of it as transactional, and because I feel that part of my job is we're not just selling them real estate. We're helping them find a home, but we're also welcoming them to a new town. And, they may not know people here. And part of what I try to do as well is if I'm having friends over, I had friends over at Christmas at my house, and I had some clients who are new to town. had them come over as well and introduced them to a few people. So it's things like that. It's having a personal relationship with them. Not necessarily that they're my best friend, or they think that consider me as their best friend, but they know that there's someone that if they have a question, I need someone to come clean my chimney. Who do I get? Or something like that. I'm just a resource there. I'm somebody they can reach out to if they need something in town, and I'm here for them.
Actually, it's funny when we do events, we do small events, so we try to keep it to like 20, 25 people in total. And so that's only 10 to maybe 15 couples. But then we really step back and like, who's going to get along? Like, who is going to click at this event, whatever we're doing? And like, maybe we can maybe there's new friendships to be had.
Yeah.
And for us, when we do pare it down like that, we actually individually get to spend more time with these people. And I get it. I'm on the same page. Like, they're not, we can't have, hundreds of best friends, but we can have really good, solid relationships with these people. And the math is everybody knows 3 people who are going to decide to make a move by the end of the year. That's 3 referral opportunities per person. That's a staggering number. And then if you actually step back, so I'm in San Francisco, you're in Connecticut. Those 2 areas, Connecticut to California, that's a lot of people move from those 2 places. And so having the relationships with agents like this, so incredibly important, because we never know when our phone's going to ring.
To that point, I had it's a Sunday morning, probably 2 weeks ago, I get a text from clients who bought with me, who then moved, but rented with me. And then they come back totally unexpectedly on a Sunday morning and say, okay, our renters are moving. We now decided to sell, so I've been in contact with them. I sent them a gift at the holidays. We text all the time. They're a younger couple, so we connect on social media, and I like when they do things. And, we have that kind of relationship. So you sort of have to meet them where they are as well. So some people, you do have to physically meet them for a coffee and sit down. Others, it's okay, you just exchange on social media and I see what you're doing and I love it. And, so it's about connecting, like I said, where they are. It's, everybody is different, and it's a different way of connecting with different people. Some it's generational, but not all.
I agree. I think sometimes it's generational. Typically what I do at the very beginning is I will just ask. The first time we meet somebody, how do you prefer to communicate? In person? Do you want to set up meetings? Do you prefer phone calls? Do you prefer text or email?
Yeah.
And they'll tell you, oh, I just prefer text. No problem. And then at that point, that's their language. So communicate, like, whatever's easiest for them, make it easy for them. And I it's the details, and it's when we really respect this is how that person wants to proceed, then that's totally cool. And I have clients who never come to any of the events, never. And that's fine. But I've also done 3-4 deals with them, and that's more amazing to me. And to your point, they're just not event people. That's just not their jam. They would rather not do that type of thing. Totally cool.
Some of them are busy professionals. I have clients who are in the medicine field. They don't really have a lot of free time, and they're on a different maybe cycle to the rest of us in terms of social life. Their social life, or it depends whether they're on or off call or whatever. So it's not easy for certain people to get to events. So yeah, they're open to work around their schedules as well.
It sounds like with your market, a lot of people are transient and they're coming in to Connecticut. Where are they coming from?
We have had a lot of people moving into Connecticut in the last, since 2020, since COVID hit. We've had a lot of people moving out of New York City, and we're continuing to see that. And initially, there was a sense that it was COVID driven, but very early on, I got the sense that it was more than just COVID. I felt like it was a generational thing. We had heard about the millennials are coming, and that had been messaging that we had been hearing since, I would say, 2017 when I got started. And yet our market here in Connecticut and in Greenwich we had a lot of inventory. We had a lot of people who wanted to sell who couldn't sell. And when you're in a market like this, not everybody needs to sell. So people are quite happy to sit on a property if they're not getting their number, so to speak. So we were at a place where we had quite a lot of inventory and we didn't have a lot of people moving in. Then we had COVID happen and you start seeing younger families moving out from the city. And when one couple moves out with their kids and loves it here, and they tell their friends, and two more couples come. So it became this, it was almost like an avalanche of people coming out in, I would say, 21, 22. It's still ongoing. So we still see that. It's just not as dense. And it's also not as dense because we don't have as much inventory as well. It's more difficult for people to find homes now.
We have such a odd predicament right now. We have sellers who want to make a move and are able to, but there's no property for them to move to. And in our market, they typically will buy a new place and then vacate and then put stage and prep, get their property ready for market. But it's not happening because we have this weird cart before the horse thing that's happening. And then in addition to some are opting to rent, but they can't find rentals. And so we're just in this weird predicament of non-activity, because it's like perpetuating itself in a weird way. It's this flywheel that's just stuck. And to go back to your earlier point, which I think we were talking about prior to this recording, is it's the interest rates. If they just come down a little bit, I think it would give people a lot more ease to start making those life moves, because I feel like people are getting to the point. It's similar to when COVID happened, is people wanted to make moves, but we were all stuck. But then once things started to happen, giving people that internal permission to do it, the floodgates opened. And I feel like we're in a similar holding pattern.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that we're definitely in a slight holding pattern right now. And I would hope that, once we see mortgage interest rates come down a little bit, people will be willing to say, okay, I'm willing to pay 5%. I've made, I have built up some equity in my home. I can take on a 5% mortgage. It makes sense, because the whole 3.5%, it's not coming back. So, we need, but, we're now, that was fine in 2023. People thought, oh, it's coming back. I'll just hang on, or, late 2022. I've had people, if I think back, I've had people call me from as early as March 2022 saying, okay, I'm waiting for interest rates to come down. So, things have gone up a lot since then in terms of mortgage rates, and those people are still paying rent, or they're still in that smaller home. I think we're going to get to the point where, life happens and their kids are getting that much older, and they really need that space, the additional space, that extra bedroom, whatever, so I think we're at the point where people have gone through a couple of years of living with the situation because of they're waiting for something, but at some point life has to move forward as well. And I think if interest rates can come down just that little bit, I think it will allow some of that deblocking to happen.
I agree. I think a lot of people currently are still evaluating the market while looking through the rearview mirror, and they're hoping it'll go back to what was in the past. And unfortunately it's in the past, and it was such a radically weird market unto itself. It's never going to go, realistically, it's never going to go back to that 2% craziness that it once was. But I also agree with you that people's lives are going to keep going, and their families are going to grow. They're going to need to upsize or downsize and just strategically make moves. And eventually they're just going to have to that need for them to make that move is emotionally going to outweigh the pain of whatever that percent is. And then it's going to start unblocking the market. But I think it needs to just stabilize long enough for people to have some comfort again, because it's a massive investment. And that's the hard part for people to get their heads around. Within your market is it second pied-à-terre homes? Is it their primary home? What do you typically see?
Even though some of these homes are, they're significant properties, they're not necessarily their primary home. We sometimes see families coming from the city, and they want a weekend place, and they can spend, $5, $6, $7 million on a compound with some 3-4 acres or maybe more, with a pool, tennis court, all of that. But it's like any market. It's got a mix of, well, not like any market. What's interesting about Greenwich is it is quite diverse, even though it has this reputation. Everyone thinks of Greenwich and they think of, $10 million estates. And yes, we have those, but we also have neighborhoods which were historically blue collar, and they are turning over and we're seeing, families coming from the city, from Brooklyn or wherever, and they're buying up some of those smaller homes and renovating them. And so those homes that they were selling around, $700,000. Now that's unusual. If you find something at that price point, they're going to be higher than that, unless you're willing to do quite a lot of work. So you have the whole spectrum. You have those smaller single family homes. We have condos. We have high end condos, and condo buildings with doormen. We don't have many of those, but we do have a couple downtown, and that's appealing to an older demographic. But we also have homes downtown where you see people sell up their large estate, but they still want to have something in Greenwich, and they'll buy a 4,000 square foot townhouse downtown. So you see a little bit of everything. And the thing that I like about Greenwich as well is it's got very different neighborhoods. We have a beach, and we have two beaches, and we have the Old Greenwich Village, which is it's like a little beach town, and it's got a very specific feel to it. But then you also have downtown Greenwich with Greenwich Avenue, which is, it's known as the Rodeo Drive of the East. So you drive down Greenwich Avenue and you've got all these fabulous stores, Saks Fifth Avenue, and all of these stores that before COVID, I would go to the city to go to some of these stores in Soho. Now they're all out here. They've all moved and opened up on Greenwich Avenue since we've had this influx of people from the city. And then you also have backcountry. So you have mid-country, you have 2 acre lots. So significant homes with 2 acres, and a lot of those homes tend to have a pool. And then a little further out, you have 4 acre properties, and they're, pool, tennis court, privacy, and that's where you see, we have the polo club out there. There are golf clubs. So it's a very varied lifestyle. You can go from, horse country to the beach in a matter of 20 minutes, driving through Greenwich.
Yeah, Greenwich holds a special place. I was born and raised in Connecticut, and Greenwich is just it's a special spot, and we should definitely talk. I've been wanting to invest, and I'm eyeballing that little pocket, so we'll have to have a conversation on the side.
Yes, okay, love to help. Yeah.
This has just been such a fun and inspiring conversation. Unfortunately, we're at time. But I do absolutely want to stay in touch with you. I thoroughly enjoy it. And I really genuinely, I love your approach with clients, and it comes out. It comes out how much you care for them, and they're not just a number on a sheet. And so I think that's just my big takeaway from this.
Treat others as you would like to be treated. I don't like it when somebody treats me like a number on a sheet. So that's the way I approach it. And, I think that, like you say, I think it comes through, and I think it resonates with people. And I end up working with people who think like me as well. So
it's true. Water seeks its own level. And I find, if you treat people with a very high level of fiduciary respect, it tends to get reciprocated. And the proof is always in the pudding. When somebody comes back to you 2-3 times to work with you again and again, and then they refer their parents to you, that's huge. And I know for me, I would never, ever, ever, ever recommend my mom to see somebody that I didn't fully feel 100% comfortable with. Like there's absolutely no way.
I have had moms refer to me, so that's a good point. I didn't even think of that, but it's very true.
Personally, in my business, I feel that's the largest honor. If somebody would recommend their mother or father or parents, that is like, oh my God, like I did an amazing job. Which obviously we always strive to do, but it's, to me, it just holds it in a very different place on a very upper echelon.
That actually goes beyond doing a good job. That's also someone that you trust.
And that goes back to your point, it's to bring up Lance Pendleton. He said, which I love that he said this, he said the best way to say to somebody that you don't care about them is put them on a mailing list. And that's the opposite of what you do. Is like you actually want to spend time with them and play pickleball and invite them to your home, which is all very telling of how you actually feel about these people that you have the privilege of working with.
They're important to me, and it's not just a business relationship. At least I don't see it that way.
So good. So thank you. I appreciate your time. And that's a wrap.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation with you and the opportunity. So thank you for reaching out to me. I appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure.